Before we get into trivia, it's time to throw it over to Mikey P with your Rangers Ed 150, the fastest 150 seconds in the National Hockey Podcast League.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Rangers Ed 150. We're getting down to the wire as the regular season comes to a close and teams are scrambling to make those playoff pushes. Out west in the Pacific Division, nothing has changed in the standings since we last talked, with Vegas, LA, and Edmonton holding on to the 1, 2, and 3 spots in this division, and the fourth place Seattle Kraken holding on to that number one wild card spot in the West. Vegas is still on a bit of a heater, putting up a 9-2-0 record through their last 11 with big wins over Carolina, the Devils, and the Tampa Bay Lightning, but 5 of these W's have come against front runners in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes, so take from this what you will. But the bottom line here is that Vegas is getting W's when it counts. As for LA and Edmonton, it's the same story as last week. Both of these teams are playing like they want to win a cup. They both have 8 wins through their last 10, and what more can you say other than that they are primed for the playoffs, and the only reason they're not higher than they are in the standings is because Vegas is playing at a similar clip. Still a dogfight between Edmonton and Seattle for that number 3 spot, with the Kraken sitting 3 points back of the Oilers with a game in hand. But regardless, it looks like all 4 of these teams are going to make it to the postseason. Seattle is that number 1 wildcard spot, as we said, and they're 6 points ahead of the Flames, who are fighting for that second wildcard spot themselves. In the Central Division, the story continues to be the Minnesota Wild, as they thrive without Kirill Kaprizov in their lineup, behind one of the best goaltending duos in the league of late, with Philip Gustafsson and Marc-Andre Fleury holding it down between the pipes. The Wild are tied in points with the Dallas Stars, but the Stars are currently sitting in first place on regulation wins. But the Wild are an absolute freight train at the moment, so it wouldn't be surprising if they did end up in that number 1 spot by season's end. The Avs are also on a bit of a heater. They're a freight train at the moment. They're rolling into their Wednesday tilt with the Penguins on a 6-game win streak. They do have 2 games in hand on both the Wild and the Stars, and sitting only 2 points back, it's very likely that they could also find themselves in first place before season's end. Last and seemingly not least, giving their recent run of play, the Winnipeg Jets are just barely holding on to that second wild card spot in the West after completely dropping the ball over the last month. The Jets have only won 6 games in their last 17 tries, and if they keep this up, they may allow Calgary to catch up. It's setting the stage for a pretty epic tilt on April 5th that could have some pretty serious playoff implications. Back east in the Atlantic Division, the Bruins are back to their winning ways, putting up 4 in the W column after dropping back-to-back games against Detroit and Chicago last week. The Leafs and Bolts are still in the 2 and 3 spots, and the resurgent Florida Panthers have played themselves into that second wild card spot, ousting the Pittsburgh Penguins, who are seemingly going to put that 16-season playoff streak to an end. One thing to keep an eye on with the Cats is the workload they will put on Sergei Bobrovsky down the stretch. Spencer Knight is still in the player assistance program, and for the time being, they are lacking a true backup goalie, so Sergei Bobrovsky is going to shoulder much of their load going down the stretch. With this in mind, he's old, and the playoffs are a pretty intense spectacle, so he may be pretty worn out going into round 1 if they do squeak into the playoffs, so keep an eye on his workload as we get towards the end of the season. Back to the top 3, the Leafs and the Bolts are also playing some exceptionally average hockey at the moment. The Leafs are looking real shaky on the back end, as has been their story for the last 5 or 6 years, particularly between the pipes, and for the first time in the same time span, the Lightning are also looking a bit vulnerable on the defensive end, having surrendered 5+ goals in 4 of their last 12 games. So outside of Boston, the Atlantic Division is looking pretty mediocre at the moment. Finally, in the Metro, this division is still sitting Canes, Devils, and Rangers in that 1, 2, 3 spot. The Rangers are pretty cemented in third, barring some crazy collapses, but the Canes have not been exceptional since Svechnikov went down. Their record says 3-0 through their 7-3-0 through their last 10, but in that stretch, they've lost 3 of 5 to quality opponents in the Devils, Golden Knights, and Leafs, only getting W's over Tampa, who was on the tail end of a back-to-back, and the Rangers in a very tight game. The rest of their wins have come against frontrunners in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes in Arizona, Montreal, Philly, and Vancouver. The Devils have also had a tough run of late, dropping a couple to Tampa, 1 to Minnesota, and 1 to the Panthers. They're sitting 2 points back of the Canes with 2 more games played, so every day it's looking more and more like we're going to see that Rangers-Devils first-round series. Finally, outside of the top 3, the Islanders are also holding on to that number 1 wild card spot, and with Buffalo racking up loss after loss and a 3-point lead on that second wild card spot, it's looking like we're going to see the blue and orange in the playoffs again this season. Boys in Blue have 2 fantastic matchups this week. Tune in on Thursday night for a big divisional tilt with the Canes, and again on Saturday night for another excellent tilt against the Panthers, who are fighting for their lives in that wild card. Should be a great game. We also got lots of exciting hockey elsewhere on the league, so stay tuned for more updates next week. This has been your 150.